Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So this video is going to be a bit different than my other tutorials and all that. In this video, I'm going to be taking apart a card that I've made in Pro Plus and showing how I make them in Pro Standard. Because a lot of you guys have been asking for certain cards that I've made in Pro Plus to be made in Pro Standard. And while I do appreciate the tutorial requests, they are a lot of work to make the cards in Pro Standard, and it's honestly a lot to film because taking it apart, putting it all into embeds is just really hard to film and make it look easy, and making whole paste bins of all those codes is really strenuous. They can get confusing, and I just think it'd be much easier to show you guys how I break apart a tutorial that I've made for Pro Plus or a card that I've made in Pro Plus and breaking it down into figuring out how can I make this into Pro Standard, what can I do to make it into Pro Standard. And so this is my entire process. So this video is going to be a bit longer than most of my how-to videos, but I seriously think this will be really helpful, and I want you all to know that this is a very long process. It's not that easy at first, and it will be difficult at first for certain cards, but it has been a process that I use all the time. And so yeah, I think let's get started. So this is the tutorial that I will be using, and I also have the card pulled up in my dashboard, and this is where like the Pro Plus version of the card. So I'm going to slowly start taking it apart and making the card in Pro Standard. Now this is not a tutorial on how to make this card in Pro Standard. I'm just showing parts of my process. Okay, so to start, I'm just going to be taking like the gradient stuff that I have from the previous card. This is all basic stuff, and I'm just going to add that to this card. So I'm just gonna kind of skip through this part. You can see this in the tutorial I make, but I'm not really going to go much details into this because this is in the tutorial that I make, and I'm honestly just like copying stuff. This is not even like Pro Standard anything. You can make this part is just regular Pro stuff, just working with card. Okay, so I'm just adjusting the page here, all of that. So I'm just going to skip through this part real quick, and I will get back to you when we go through, when we start using embeds and just working through all that. Okay, so now we're gonna get started with actually making this card in Pro Standard. So I'm just hopping to the tutorial here, and within that tutorial, I'm going to find the spot that I'm looking for in the code. So I'm just like hopping through getting that part. It took me a while to actually like find a good place to pause for it. But as you can see, I get the code like it's in the video. All my codes are in the video. You just have to follow them. You have to follow them along, even if you don't have Pro Plus. You can follow this along. And I'm gonna get that code, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hop into card, and I'm gonna open a container as if I was on Pro Plus. But what I'm gonna do is a bit different. I'm gonna adjust the padding like I always do in Pro Plus, Pro Standard, whatever. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna think, okay, well, in the tutorial, this is what I had. I had that code that we showed. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in an embed. I'm going to first put a footer marker, because that's always where I put all the codes go under the footer. That's always what I do. And in that embed, I'm going to put it first two style embeds, the opening style and the closing style. And so I'm going to get the container name. Our container name is container 1. That is the ID that card has given us. So we're just going to name that container 1. And we're going to put 2 braces. Once I put them between 2 braces, I'm just going to copy what I had in that. So I have the border code, which is 1px solid, and the color code that I have. And I have the border radius, which is what's going to make that, you know, have the semicircle kind of. And so that's the code that I have. Now I'm just copying this from the tutorial. Now that I put that in the style embed, you're going to notice in the tutorial itself, I just use a regular gradient that's from the card. Now you're not actually going to be able to do this if you're using Pro Standard, and I'll show you why. So I'm doing that here. I'm putting the gradient like I would before. Now, but if I publish the card as a template, just like how I'm doing here, I jump into it. You see how it looks weird? That's because we have to use a code for the background. So I'm just hopping into a CSS gradient thing that I use. I took a while to find the link that I always use. But so once you get that, I'm just going to fix the degree that I want it to, and I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to jump it back into my embed, and that's where I'm going to put that code again, that background code, and I'm just going to change the color of that code to make it the gradient that I want, which is what I showed in the tutorial as well. So the thing with Pro Standard is you're going to want to make adjustments. You're going to have to make adjustments because if I copy every single code and put it within an embed, it's not going to work. And if I follow it blindlessly, it's not going to work. There are certain things that won't let it work. So I have to make adjustments to the coding as we go. So here, if I had just done the regular background, it would look weird. When I get rid of that and I use the background code, HTML code, that's when it works. Now here I'm just adjusting the padding, but as you can see, even when I do that, it's not going to fix that. We're going to have to find an alternative way to fix that, and we'll end up doing that. Because what we're going to do is, at this point, we're also going to start adding more containers. We're going to need the opposing container. We're going to need the middle container. You're going to need all of that stuff. And we're going to follow the tutorial nook to nook. Like, we're going to follow it exactly what it says. But we're going to put it in a different place. Instead of putting it in the text element stuff, you're going to put it in an embed that you're specifically editing. So I am editing that container as if I'm in Pro Plus, but in reality I'm just putting it into an embed, and that is the easiest way to take a Pro Plus tutorial and put it and make it for Pro Standard, which is exactly what I'm doing. Now I'm making the opposing side. I'm copying the container because I'm using a different container. This is container 2, and I'm going to change the border radius because we're doing the opposing side of the thing. And so yeah, you want to follow the tutorial basically to a point, but you're going to just have to make slight adjustments along the way, and that's fine. Making these adjustments will end up making these more complex Pro Plus style cards available for Pro Standard, and it's just a lot easier. And it is, well, in the sense of a lot easier if you figure it out on your own, because if I was to make this into a tutorial where I was pinpointing little things like copying codes left and right, it gets complicated, and making templates of other people's cards is something I'm avoiding doing nowadays, so I'm not doing that anymore. So this is, I honestly think, the best way to do that. So I'm adding the icons and all that exactly like how I would do if I was making this in Pro Plus. Again, like I said, you're following the tutorial to a point where you're basically making it, but you're just doing some slight adjustments into making sure it'll work for Pro Standard. Now, sometimes you notice that when you're making a card in Pro Standard following a Pro Plus tutorial, it's not going to look exactly the same at first. And that's totally fine because we're going to rectify it. We're going to find a way to rectify it. That's how we're going to roll. That's the best way to roll doing this. So I know that when I'm going to be jumping that through the tutorial, I'm going to notice that I make the height of this container 14 EM, So I look at the element ID. This is container 3. Always make sure you're doing the right container element or whatever element ID you have. I'm going to jump to my style embed after I make the adjustments that I did seeing the tutorial. I'm going to add that border. This one you don't even need Pro Plus or whatever for, or Pro Standard. You can just use the regular card stuff. I'm going to jump into the style embed and I'm going to add, okay, container 3. Let's put the height. Now when I put the height and I publish it, we're going to notice that, see, it looks a bit weird, but that's totally fine. We're going to let that be for a bit. Or I can use this divider as a stance, make it transparent, make it a vertical orientation, and make it about 14 EM tall. And then when I publish that again, see, it looks exactly how we want it to. Later we can add a music player and adjust that. Or later we can, you just have to make the adjustments on your own, exactly what you want. So for example, if I want to add that pixel text, I can't use a text embed, or I can't just use a text element and then just add that text in. I'm going to have to do it in a roundabout way. And that's fine. So here I'm just moving around just so I can copy exactly what I had, the text that I had before, because it's a lot easier to move around than follow that tutorial without follow the tutorial when you're watching it, not by skipping it around. So I'm just gonna adjust it. I want it to be at the bottom. Now I could use positioning for this, or I can just use the card stuff that we have and just adjust that to be at the bottom. You might have to change that later. That's fine. You'll adjust the positioning and anything as it goes. So here we're just gonna make the pixel font that I want. I link all my fonts down below for this reason. If you want to make it in Pro Standard, I would go to the card and I would click the paste bin and I would get the font face for the pixel font that I want. And I'm going to basically make the pixel font. And I'm going to make it exactly how I want it to. And now you can add it. Let's say I want to add the font size. I want to change the color. I can do that all here. Instead of editing the specific text element, I'm just doing it here in an embed. You're going to put the div ID. Here we label the div ID pixel 1. And we're just going to put what we want between the div ID. So here I'm just going to copy what I said before. And yeah, once you copy that, you're just going to add that into the cart. And then exactly as I do right here. So I'm publishing the card, and then when I publish it, I noticed, oh, it's way too big. Maybe I didn't look at it right. So I'm going to pop back in. I'm going to see what size font did I have in the tutorial. Here, I'm just checking back here. I use 0.75 EM. Fine. I'm going to change that in the card. 0.75 EM. Publish it. And it looks exactly the same as the Pro Plus card right now. Now I'm going to jump back to the tutorial. I'm going to jump back to that card. Now here's where sometimes you're going to have to make some changes. And I will show you. Let's say I'm copying these button embeds. If I copy the button exactly like how it is in the tutorial, where I get the exact size down, where I get the spacing down, where I get, like the border radius, where I get all of that stuff down, and where I edit it, and I copy that exactly into the card and do it like how I've been doing for the past container embeds, you're going to see that it's not going to work the same. So this is buttons 1, and then if I copy that into our little code embed and all that, I put it in, and I publish it, this is what's going to happen. So sometimes it doesn't always work. That's not the end of the road. You just have to figure out a way to get it to work. So how am I going to get it to work? Easy. I'm going to manually make the buttons. How am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by using a style embed, another style embed, and using that by making like a text embed, and then using a href and making my own buttons like that. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you can copy the codes, and sometimes maybe it won't work, but there's always an alternative way. And if you don't know that alternative way, that's okay. I have RetroSpring and I have Curious Cat, I have Twitter, I have Instagram, I have email. You can email me or send me a DM or send a question saying, hey, I'm trying to make this in Pro Standard and I'm not really understanding how to make this work. Can you give me some advice? I will help you. I'm not gonna let you down and say, no, I'm not gonna help you. I will help you 100%. So here, instead, I'm making the background of that nothing, and I'm putting everything in a mark. So if I'm marking it, that's what I can put in there. So I mark and I put, okay, and I'm gonna put the href. This is to, to secure the link. So I want this button to take me back to the home page always. So I'm gonna name that home page. And I'm gonna close the mark and the href and all that. And then I'm going to keep doing that for my next buttons. And we're gonna keep doing that for the 3 buttons that we want for how this card looks. And when we publish the card and we jump into the link, I'm just gonna get rid of that, and I forgot to add the div at the end. I'm getting rid of that, and I'm just gonna get rid of that buttons code that we had earlier, just so we can show you. Now, they are big, but we have gotten the buttons that we want. Now we just have to make what we want. So, okay, I want the font size to be smaller. Boom, that's what we're gonna make it. Boom, font size is smaller. Okay, maybe I want a space between all this stuff, like if I don't have a space. And maybe I want the buttons to be a bit like, not crammed, like inside. Boom, got that. But okay, maybe I want some space between the buttons. Let's make the font color more invisible. So we do that. We're gonna make the font size, the font color more, we're gonna make the font color invisible. And we're gonna put little, periods between each part so we have a gap between each button. Okay, maybe that was too big of a button. Maybe I also need to make sure that I get the color of the mark to be black. So we add that. We say, okay, let's fix this also. We don't want all these extra periods here. We just do 1 period between each. I'm going to adjust the padding. I want it to be a bit bigger on one side. It's slowly matching the other side. This is what we want. Maybe I want there to be no line under. I'm going to adjust that with the A, and then in between that text decoration, I want none. Boom. And we're basically getting how the card is looking. I'm going to get rid of that container 3 thing I had that earlier. I was testing with it. It didn't work. That's fine. It doesn't always have to work. And look, this card is looking almost exactly like how we wanted that Pro Plus card to look like at first. If I jump to the Pro Plus, as you can see, there's so much more I need to add. But I can jump back through that tutorial and see, okay, this is how I did that. I can add into a style embed. I can do that. Maybe I don't want to use style embeds for every single text that I use. That's fine. You can use a text element, and then you can adjust that text element in our codes embed that we're doing here, just like we did with the container. I want to add a font to a specific text. I get that text element ID, and I put that in the codes embed. And I define that element and all that in the code embed itself. Or maybe I use an embed and I'm adjusting that text stuff in there. The process you do it does not matter. Everyone has their own way of doing it. But I'm here to show you that it is possible to take a Pro Plus tutorial and follow it to make a Pro standard. But it's not always easy, and I understand that. It is difficult at first, and it is more difficult with certain cards than it is with other cards. But like I said earlier, I'm here to help you, and I will help you if you have a question on if you're confused on a certain part. But I'm here to show you that it is possible to follow it, and it is difficult at first, but trust me, it will work. And also, this is a really great way to get more familiarity with HTML coding and practicing all those little HTML stuff. So this is really helpful, and I really hope this video will help you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, I know this video was a bit longer. Sorry you had to hear my voice for about like 20 minutes. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe to my channel for more videos like this.